Thank you.
My first poem is The Feast of San Gennaro. It was told to me by a friend of mine who was one of the soldiers who came into Naples in a tank after World War II. I am one of those young soldiers, dirty, disheveled, a week's growth of beard, whose tanks rumbled into Naples on San Gennaro's day. The war was over. There were gaping holes where buildings had stood. Rubble blocked streets, statues were armless and legless. Exhausted, ready for peace, we threw bundles of food to the people, candy to the children. The people shouted, "Viva la Americans! Viva la Iglesias!" The bells were ringing in La Chiesa de Santa Maria, ringing for San Gennaro, patron saint of Naples, beheaded 1,000 years ago by cruel Roman soldiers. His blood, black powder collected in a vial, liquefies on his day. The priest pulls up the vial. The people wait for the glorious moment. If it takes too long, there are shouts, "You old rascal, hurry up, don't take your time." I know all this from my father. His village is nestled against a sheltering mountain above Naples. Some days later, I visited the village. The relatives were there. We sat in a circle and passed around an egg. What did it mean? An ancient custom symbolizing new life, new hope. The bells were ringing on San Gennaro's day when we rode into Naples. Viva la Americans! Viva la Iglesias! Viva San Gennaro! The second one is about the geese who listened to my Beethoven. The damp, hot air encircles my being, holding me captive. I park by the fence. Two goose families, long necks waving, rubbery feet patting the earth. 5 teenagers and 3 smaller brown fluffs are pulling up strands of clover, fragrant as rosemary. I lower the window. The finale of Beethoven's 8th Symphony bursts from my car radio, filling the air with glorious noise. 2 goose parents stand still, rooted to the ground, not uttering one goose poem. They don't move until the last sound dies away. Then with great dignity, the 2 leave slowly. Perhaps the only geese acquainted with Beethoven. This one is about Preacher Lewis, who was a preacher when I was growing up. Preacher Lewis was an Episcopal priest, small and wiry, gingery hair, which stuck straight up most of the time, short pointed ears, and a generous mouth given to hearty bellows of laughter when he wasn't proclaiming the word. His eyes, bright blue, penetrated one's very being. Bits of whiskers dotted his unshaven jaw. Dressed in worn jeans with a white collar around his novelty neck, he rode the Denver and Rio Grande Western, the old steam train, up and down its tracks. He baptized the conductor, the engineer, the fireman, the porters, and any baby who happened to be riding along. All babies received a baby cap knitted by Preacher himself. Preacher, the bane of the bishop's existence, lived a free and happy life. His was a life dedicated completely to the Lord, who, he knew, understood his every move. A frequent visitor to the bars and saloons, he refused all alcoholic beverages, but passed around his old moth-eaten hat. "Boys," he said to the card-playing cowhands, "fill up the hat with money, paper money, to feed and clothe Widow Brown's children." "The preacher is here," they all said, and put down their drinks and cards. "Listen to the preacher." "Boys," Preacher said, "lift up your eyes unto the Lord, for you are truly blessed." This one is little Henry, a little Navajo boy who died in my sister and my arms. We were teenagers. 8 years old, full of fun, bright dark eyes, tousled hair. He ran along the hospital corridor, never thinking his life was almost at an end. Disease slowly attacked his body, destroying healthy limbs. His Navajo mother, Shema, abandoned him when he was 5. Little Henry lay dying in our arms. With tears running down our cheeks, my sister and I held him tightly as he cried for his Shema. We promised him his mother, whom we knew would never come. And this is Squirrel Talk. We had a friend who was licensed by the state to rescue baby animals, and so she gave us her baby squirrels. The first time we saw them, tiny gray balls of fur, tightly closed eyes, feathery tails curled tightly around, a cozy heated box full of pine straw. An occasional squeak puzzled a questioning kitty who wondered what little beasts had come into his life. Every 4 hours during the day, we heated goat's milk, wrapped the babies in woolly blankets, and fed them with tiny doll bottles. They sucked noisily, holding on with restless paws. The time came when they leaped and cavorted into a larger cage, and leaping on a little swing and burrowing in the pine straw, gnawing on pine cones or wood was a special delight. The time came to give them their freedom. We opened the cage door and they hesitated, not knowing what lay outside the cage. They timidly explored the area close to the door and slowly moved away. Such adventures lay ahead. Several years later, Miss Catherine Squirrel still returns every day or so for nuts. And my last one is Sexy Rose Conforti. She was the owner of an apartment we rented in the worst part of New Haven when my husband was at Yale. Sexy Rose Conforti clatters up and down the fire escape on her high-heeled furry slippers, a thin violet negligee covering sharp little bones, a touch of midnight in Paris behind delicate ears, glossy red lips waiting to touch those of an unsuspecting tenant. Sexy Rose searches for an open window through which she climbs into the warm bed of a frightened new tenant, preferably a young man innocent of the ways of an exciting, desirable woman. The young man departs hurriedly next day. Sexy Rose opens a bottle of her best wine. And that's the